Okay, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be modding this Nintendo Switch V2 using an RP2040 mod chip. This is the little package the mod chip came in, so let's open this up and see what we've been given to work with. So you can see here we have one mod chip, two CPU flex cables, and one USB-C programming cable. Now this chip is what's known as the RP2040 Core mod chip. This is an alternative to the SX mod chips and also the HW Fly mod chips. These go for about £10 to £15 on AliExpress, and today I'm going to install it. Now when doing this installation, you should know that we are only going to use the mod chip, possibly this USB-C cable if we need to program the chip, and one of the two CPU flex cables. Of the original Nintendo Switch, so not the OLED, just the regular one, there are two types. There is the V1 launch console, which is vulnerable to the RCM exploit. So if we had a V1 launch console, we would use this flex cable, which is labeled V1. If you have a V2 patched switch, like mine, I know mine is a patched switch because I checked the serial code. I'll leave the website to do that in the description below. And also because I just brought it brand new from a shop, and the V1s are no longer being sold directly from Nintendo. So this is the flex cable I'm going to use. If you would like a guide for a V1 switch, then there is one on my channel. I'll also leave it in the description below. But today I'm going to do the V2 installation on the Switch. If you're following along, make sure to read the disclaimers in the description below, and let's get into the install. Before we begin this project, I'd like to give a shout out to this video sponsor, PCBWay. For those who don't know, PCB stands for Printed Circuit Board. PCBs are the neatest and cleanest way to present your electronic projects, and without them, most of my projects wouldn't be possible. I'm constantly using PCBs in my projects, for example, a mod chip like this one. PCBWay's services allow you to get your own PCBs printed at affordable prices using their easy-to-use website. They also offer board assembly, 3D printing and CNC work. Whether you're a beginner or an expert, PCBWay is the way for you. Now back to the video. The first thing we're going to do is take the back panel off the console. So to do this, we're going to remove both of the Joy-Cons and get out our screwdriver kit. And we're going to need a few different types of screws. You can see on the top of the console here we have a regular Phillips screw. But on some of the other screws we have tri-wing screws. So I'm going to grab this screw bit here for the tri-wing screws and see if it fits, and start taking out these screws and organising them in my iFixit tray. I'd like to mention that I do have a screen protector on this console. That is the only reason I have it face down, otherwise I'd be using a cloth or a mouse mat or something of that sort. So we've got these 4 screws out from the back of the console. So I did all of that using the Y00 screw bit. I'm going to switch over to the 000. And then we're going to do the bottom screws near the USB-C port. Just like this. So there's 2 here. And 1 here at the top by the air vent. Then we're going to pop up the kickstand, and there is another screw under there, another Phillips, so we can remove that. Then on the side of the console we need to remove the 3rd screw from the top, so the one here by this clip, and then it's the next one down. So we need to do that on both the sides of the console. These are much chunkier screws. And the other side. There we go. And then the back panel should simply just be able to come off, so you can just pull it off like this, not using too much force. Just like this, undoing the card reader slot. There we go. And that is the inside of the console. So my method of remembering the screws is simply just to write on a piece of paper. So I'm going to write outer shell, and then I'm going to get all the screws, so pick them all up and place them here. You can make this as detailed as you want, so if you want to know which ones go exactly into which places, then you can do that. And then what I do is grab some sellotape and just stick it down like that, just to keep them in place. And that just makes sure that they're not going anywhere and we're not going to lose them. There's probably better methods to doing this, but this is just the simple, cheap way that I do. Next we have some screws to remove this metal shield. So I'm going to start with the Phillips screw to remove the micro SD slot. Okay, and then this board here, you can simply just pull up on. And there we go. That's really easy to replace. And then we have all these other screws. So one here. These all look to be the same size, so I'm not too fussed about sorting them to go back exactly where they are. I would say at this point that I do recommend an iFixit kit. Not because I'm sponsored, I'm not. I just think they're good quality tools, and if you strip one of these screws in the switch, it's a real pain to unstrip it and get in there, and it just makes a mess of the internals. Okay, that looks to be all the pieces, all the screws, sorry, so let's try and get this cover off. I'm just simply going to lift up like that and take it away. There we are, so we can see the thermal paste on there. We're going to have to replace that later. And once again, getting my screw sheet out, and I'm just going to put metal shield and put all the screws on there. And there we go. The next thing we need to do is unplug the battery. So to unplug the battery, all we're going to do is get a little tool here and just simply pull up like that, and just bend the cable a tiny bit so it's not going to make contact again while we're working on the console. Next we have a few more screws to get the heatsink off to access the CPU APU thing. I'm not sure exactly what it's called. So taking off these screws for the heatsink, and then now we can get a little tool and simply pry up on this a tiny bit, and it's actually stuck down with adhesive up here, so we want to come closer to there and just slowly pry up like this. There we are, just like that. So that is the heatsink removed. Next comes removing the CPU cover. First I'm going to clean up the thermal paste off of here, so I'm just going to rub it off like this, just with a dry Q-tip and a tiny bit of isopropyl on there, just to get up the last bits. We'll clean this more when we're reassembling, but we just want it clean enough so we can touch it. And then the dry end of the Q-tip, and just clean all this up here and make sure it's nice and dry. You can see there, even though it didn't look like there's a lot, it's quite a good amount there. Next we need to remove this cover. Now this is the delicate bit. There are tiny little pegs, like metal pegs, holding this thing down. So we're going to try this first with a plastic tool. So I have a little spudgy thing here, and I'm simply just going to try and lift up on this. You can see there I've made an opening, and here, and there we go. That has been removed. A good amount of thermal paste on there. We're going to put this one aside because we don't need to access that yet, but we do need to clean this thermal paste up to access the capacitors underneath. So cleaning this up, just some isopropyl, going to put it on a Q-tip and just try our best to clean up all the paste. This can be quite difficult just because they're so small, so don't be tempted to go too quick with this. What I'm also going to try is get a toothbrush. This is one I use for just soldering projects, and just kind of lightly, you know, get the bristles in between those components, just like this. Now that cleaning process is a little bit risky with all these capacitors, so what I like to do is simply just quickly test the console actually turns on. So before we do any difficult soldering, and it does. So we have the Nintendo Switch logo, so we don't have a heatsink at the minute, so we're just simply going to turn it off. I don't think this matters much, but I forgot to remove my cartridge. Ooh, video coming soon. Okay, so now this is all exposed, we need to get soldering, so I'm going to switch over to the microscope. Okay, so over here on the microscope, you can see the points we need to solder to. I'm going to get out my V2 flex cable, and I'm going to grab it like this, and stick it in here. So it kind of goes under the shield a little bit. So you can see here, those are the points that I'm going to be soldering to. Now before we do the installation, we need to get the flex cable on its own and pre-tin it. So to do this, I'm going to add a little bit of flux onto the cable. Just like this. Okay, and come in with my 6040 tin lead solder. Clean off my iron tip and simply just add a tiny bit of solder onto these points. Just like this. Okay, and then we're going to reinsert the flex cable, just like this. Here it is, like that. And then we're going to apply some flux. I like to grab some tweezers just to hold the cable down here. Okay, so maybe a little bit more solder needed. So there we go, that's connected. And let's come in with the other one. So if you have what I just had, where you had a big ball of solder on the end of your iron, just clean the iron off because you do not need all of that. Okay, and that one's connected as well. Okay, so that's gone a little bit messy, so we're going to add a little bit more flux. You can see there it's bridged onto the wrong one. Clean the iron off completely. And just touch it there to reflow it. There we go, and the other one. So that is connected. There we go. Okay, so that side is connected. Most of the installs I've seen, people usually do the first one and then they ruin it on the second one because they've got too confident. So I just really want to emphasize how much you need to take your time when doing this, and it should not be like a 5-minute thing. Especially if it's your first console, you should really be taking your time with these, as I am here. So once again, add a tiny bit there. Looks like we've connected that one, but there's a little bit too much solder for my liking, so I'm gonna get my tweezers out. Push down on the cable. Okay. Really important to keep cleaning your iron. There we go. And this one doesn't look too connected, so I'm just gonna add a tiny bit more solder to that one. Once again, we'll add a little bit more flux. So you can see that it's bridged onto the wrong one. Okay, so it's gone a bit wrong, so cleaning the iron, going in again. Cleaning the iron. There we go, so we've got that piece off. So now if we reflow this, maybe get a tiny bit more on the iron. Okay, and that looks connected, but I'm not sure it's satisfactory. Just adding a little bit more flux. Never hurts to add a bit more flux. Clean the iron again. Clean the iron again. And if that's connected, then I'm going to leave it alone. And it does look connected. There we go. What I'm going to do here is clean this all up with some alcohol, so we can just really see if it's all connected. A little bit more flux. It looks like this one over here is bridging. So just like this. Clean the iron off, and we just need to redo this one. There we go. So that's not bridging now. It actually looks like a pretty clean install. I'd say it's cleaner than the V1 console I did. Okay, then I'm gonna grab the multimeter and we're gonna test these points. So putting it on continuity mode, I forget exactly which side, but one of them has to bridge to ground. So it looks like this one. So there we go, it looks like they are connected. There we go. So that, in theory, is all connected properly. Now we do have these two anchor points to solder, so this one and this one, but I'm not going to do this until I fully know that the console's working. So I'm going to assemble the mod chip first, and then we're going to come back and do that. Okay, so over here on the console, this is what it's looking like. At this point we can do a quick test boot just to make sure the console works without the chip, which it does. It looks fully functional with the CPU flex installed. There is no heatsink, so let's turn this off fairly promptly. There we are, and now we can plug the mod chip in and see if it works. Now to plug this in, we're going to need to remove this eMMC module. So the mod chip kind of acts as like a middleman for this. So we're just going to go here and simply just pry up like that, and it's going to pop off. It sometimes takes this metal shield with it, so all you need to do there is just simply peel that off and reapply it here, and just clip it back on there like that. So the mod chip's going to sit like this in the console, so this port here is going to plug into the port where the eMMC module used to be. But first we need to plug in the CPU flex cable. So to do this, we're going to put up the little lock there and bend the cable round like this and plug it in. Okay, so it's currently like this. Then what we need to do is get the eMMC module and plug that into the PicoFly chip. So just like that, it'll clip on the chip, and then we flip this round and plug the mod chip into the old eMMC port, just like that. And that is the full assembly of the mod chip. And that is it. That is the full assembly of the mod chip. So all that's left to do now is plug the battery in, just like that, and then give it a test boot and see if it works. So let's see if we get anything here. Okay, so we've got Nintendo and it's gone straight to the Switch OS, which is a bit strange. Okay, so I'm going to leave an error like this in the video because I think it might help someone who has run into the same issue as me. It turns out that when I did the V1 switch video, that the chip came pre-programmed, but for some reason it doesn't look like this chip has been programmed. Nothing seems to be damaged because the console is booting into the official firmware and is using the eMMC chip through the mod chip. So it looks like we're going to have to use this piece, the USB-C thing, to program the console, program the mod chip through my computer. So let's do that and see if it works. Then what I'm going to do is get the little USB thing and I'm going to plug it into this port here, making sure that this is up on the flex cable. And then I'm going to plug it in here, apply a little bit of pressure and then put the little flap down. Just like that, so that's now plugged in. Then what I'm going to do is get a USB-C cable going from my computer and gently plug it in like this. And you can see there it's detected it. So once it's plugged into the computer, what you're going to do is go and get the UF2 file that I've linked in the description below. This is the firmware. It's going to mount itself on the computer as a drive, so a storage mass media. If it does not appear on the computer, what you need to do is unplug the USB-C cable, hold the boot button on the mod chip, and while you're holding the button, plug the cable into the computer. Go ahead and drag the UF2 file onto the storage media, and it should eject itself, and this is an indication that the mod chip is fully programmed. Okay, so I'm back with the chip pre-programmed. Thanks to Switchbrew for sending me over the firmware file. I'll leave his link in the description below to his channel. So now we've got the battery plugged in, chip is programmed. Let's give it a first boot. So we've got blue light, and then green, and there we go. No SD card. So now, the only thing we need to do is just reassemble the console, but there is a few different things that we need to do first and during the reassembly process. So now that the chip is working, we can make sure the battery's unplugged and solder SP1 and 2 to the metal shield. This is just an extra bit of security to make sure that there's no pressure on those points. Okay, so we're going to come in with the iron here and simply just solder on the pad like this, just a tiny bit, and you want to kind of flow it a little bit onto the metal shield as well. Okay, that's done, and then we're going to come in with some isopropyl alcohol. So that's all nice and cleaned up. Now we can reapply the thermal paste. So I've got some thermal grease here, so this is the stuff I'm going to be using. So just a tiny dot of that there, just to help with the thermals. And then we're going to grab the metal shield and we need to modify this a little bit. So it's going to go on like this. But this here will crush this CPU flex cable. So we're going to grab our metal tweezers from here, and we're going to kind of mark here so you can see it's on that clip. And then what we're going to do is just kind of push down on this and just fold it in to make sure that there's room for that flex cable to go by. So now with that all cut and the thermal paste applied, we can go ahead and stick on the metal shield again, just like this, and push it down, and it should just clip back into place using those metal clips. Now what we need to do is grab some electrical tape and stick it on this metal shield. So I'm going to stick some here to make sure that nothing on the chip shorts out onto the shield. So you can see just like that. Just a little kind of extra barrier of protection. The next step is to reapply the heatsink. Once again, we need to clean all the old thermal paste off. So just like this. All the old thermal paste comes off nicely. There we go, and on the other side as well. Okay, and then reapplying the next level of thermal paste. So you can see we need to do it kind of like in the middle here. Just like a chunk of it there. Thermal paste seems to be a very controversial topic. Everyone says everyone else is doing it wrong, so do it the way you like. There we are, and now we need to re-screw in the heatsink. So this is the first set of screws that we're using, which luckily is marked here as heatsink. So we can just get to these screws. So we're going to grab our screwdriver and re-screw in these 3 screws. Now we need to bring attention to the metal shield, which we need to clean. So some isopropyl on that, and just get up all these big chunks of the paste. Now a little modification we need to make is to the metal shield. You'll notice if we put it on here, the Modchip is crushed. So what we need to do is make a small cutout on the metal shield. It's important not to cut too far towards the heatsink because we don't want to interfere with this. So we just want to get the cut right. So put it on, you know, as it is. And I'm going to start cutting from about here. Just like this. And to here. Just like that. This piece is going to be quite sharp, so just be very careful. Okay, so by the looks of it, we need to cut a little bit more off here. And you can see now we should just be able to put the shield on, just like this. So now we reapply the thermal paste for the last time. So let's grab the paste here and apply some in like a line down the heatsink. Like this. Also at this point, making sure to re-plug in the battery, putting the metal shield on, lining it up, pushing it down like that, and now we need to grab our screws and screw in the metal shield. Now it should be noted here that I've cut too much, so I've cut a little bit too much here and a little bit too much here. This isn't going to affect the performance of the console, but cosmetically it doesn't look great. It's not something I'm personally too bothered with, but something to be noted if you do this yourself. So we don't want the Modchip to move around here, so I've made this a little bit difficult for myself because I've cut too much. But what I am going to do is get some more tape and just kind of do it like this to hold the chip in, just to stop it from moving around when the back panel's on. So here's my setup, just basically pushing the tape down into all the little crevices. Not the best install I've done, but it'll work. At this point we're going to do another boot test, see if it still works, and it does. And now we just need to put the back shell back on. Of course, not forgetting to plug in the micro SD card reader, and then the screw. So that is all the screws. One is missing because I cut this off way too much, but I'm not too worried about that. But I definitely don't recommend you make that mistake. Now we can put on the back panel of the console. Here we are, so making sure it's all clipped in nice. And now it's just the final screws. Okay, let's start with the Phillips screws. So one going up here, one going into the side rail here, and then the last Phillips one is the micro SD slot. And then finally we switch over to the tri-wing driver, and then the final 4 here to hold the back plate on. Okay, so there we go, fully assembled and modded. What we can do is press the power buttons to go into official firmware. just to make sure everything's still good. For some reason it seems to have lost the time. I assume that's something to do with unplugging the battery maybe. But yeah, that is it. We've got a fully modded Nintendo Switch here today with the RP2040 core using the V2 ribbon cable. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.